coming up on The Cost of Living.
It's pretty clear the Bank of Canada is going to be cutting interest rates at some point, and that is in the reasonably near future. There's very little debate about the fact that rates are going to be lower as we move through the summer and into the fall.
If your mortgage is up for renewal, a rate cut is the sound of sweet music. Unless it also lights a fire back under inflation. Hi, I'm Paul Haberstrood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. The Bank of Canada could cut interest rates this week. If it does, it will be the first time rates have gone down in more than 2 years. So, does this mean inflation is licked? What about the housing market? We talked to Scotiabank chief economist Jean-Francois Perrault. That's later in the show. Also today, before money made the world go round, people traded. How about a bushel of wheat for a pair of shoes? Pretty old school, but bartering is making a comeback. Up first, sit down at a keyboard and within seconds you can generate an image of you dunking over LeBron on the moon. AI can be fun like that, sure, but it also comes with a cost. If you thought to yourself back in 2015, you know what? I should buy 1,000 shares of NVIDIA. Then, congratulations. It was trading at $5. Now, it's at $1,100 a share. And that stock you bought? Yeah, you're a millionaire. 1.15 mil, actually. So, good job by you. The market loves NVIDIA because the market is ravenous for all things artificial intelligence. NVIDIA makes more than 90% of the specialized chips that power AI. It can't keep up with demand. Stuff like ChatGPT has only been around for a minute, but
after I started using it more and more, I realized that, it really can be applied to anything.
Justin Huang has been using ChatGPT since it came out. For him, that was high school, so he's basically an AI native.
If you're writing, for example, a cover letter or something like that to a specific thing, you can ask ChatGPT to generate you a cover letter based on the description of the job. It really used for anything. I know that some of my friends, we were talking about it the other day, that they actually use it to give them advice. Not that anyone should ask ChatGPT to give you advice, but sometimes it actually can.
Is Gen Z using AI to play She Loves Me, She Loves Me Not? Now, Justin says he's all business. He just finished his first year at the University of Toronto. And when it comes to studying,
sometimes I'll be reading through textbooks and I'll find that the way they explain something is very, very complicated. But I can ask ChatGPT, can you explain this as if I were a 15-year-old? And it'll usually give an example of I don't know, maybe some economic or maybe some finance term in terms of video games and piggy bank savings.
So how often does he ask ChatGPT those kinds of questions?
Every day. Every time I sit down to study, I'd use it. I'd have a ChatGPT browser open.
Artificial intelligence is no longer the next big thing. It's here. And sure, we know about the existential threat of our robot overlords destroying humanity. But before we get there, we could have another problem. AI gobbles up a huge amount of energy.
In a few years from now, by the year 2027, AI could be responsible for consuming more electricity than my home country, the Netherlands.
Alex de Vries is the founder of Digiconomist and a PhD student at the University of Amsterdam. He made international headlines with a study that looked at AI's pending electricity needs. His forecast? That AI servers will soon use more electricity than the Netherlands? He thinks that could actually be lowballing things. AI can be used for a lot of stuff. It can summarize Justin's econ lecture, or give his friends dating advice. But
When someone's goofing around, they're probably unaware of what is required in the background to make that goofing around happen.
When you type a query into an AI chatbot, what happens next is invisible. It's like flicking on a light switch. We don't really think about it. But in the background, what's required are servers. Not run-of-the-mill technology you find in regular data centers. AI servers use souped-up NVIDIA chips that devour electricity. Your random AI query uses 10 times the electricity of a simple Google search.
The big problem with AI is bigger is better. This is something that you don't see in regular server hardware. I mean, if for example, streaming services, there is no reason to have more computational power in the background. It doesn't benefit you necessarily. It doesn't make the service better. But in AI, there is a very big incentive to keep feeding your models more data, keep making them better, because ultimately they will perform better. And a better performing model will theoretically allow you to gain a bigger market share. So there's a very big economic incentive to keep feeding models more data.
Right now, the world's data centers take up 1% of global electricity demand. In a few years, Alex estimates AI servers alone will increase that demand by more than half. And then there's Bitcoin mining, the OG of computational energy hogs. If you put all those together,
you could be talking about 3 to 4% of global electricity consumption for all data centers, including cryptocurrency mining, by the year 2027.
Up to 4% of the world's electricity. That's a big jump in just a few years. So then, where will we get all this extra energy? For Alex, this is where things get real.
If we are rapidly expanding our energy demand globally while we only have a limited renewable energy supply available, then even if we are putting all our renewables in data centers, somewhere else we're going to be using more fossil fuels, and that's the real problem.
The world is already ramping up renewables as fast as it can. So even if every AI server was powered by green energy, for global carbon emissions, it's really just robbing Peter to pay Paul. AI is about to put even more pressure on the planet. We could help this by using less AI. Only, come on, is that really going to happen? Look at NVIDIA's share price, or Justin's friends asking chatbots for life advice. So if the AI train ain't slowing down, what about making the chips more efficient? Well, this is happening. Ironically, though, boosting energy efficiency may actually do more to hurt than help. In economics, this is something known as Jevons paradox. An economist named William Jevons came up with it back in the 1860s.
What he observed was that at the time, the production of coal was getting a lot more efficient. And he observed that as the production of coal was getting more efficient, people started using more of it. So instead of a reduction in the total use of coal because of increased demand, the total use of coal actually went up rather than down.
When we came up with more energy-efficient light bulbs, it didn't mean we used less electricity. It meant we bought more bulbs, burned them for longer, and lit up more places. So it could go for AI. If talk of the climate change consequences of AI's electricity appetite sounds familiar, it's because it is. Bitcoin's energy usage started making headlines around 2018. Regulators are only starting to do something about it now. And that something is just more disclosure. The world is already trying to electrify huge chunks of the economy, turn more vehicles into EVs. So, as if we didn't have enough on our plate, now AI is going to take even more energy?
The current times we're living in requires us to be very mindful about the way we're using resources, and at the same time we're almost mindlessly throwing this very energy-intensive technology at all problems we have. It's a terrible combination. And actually, AI is just fundamentally incompatible with environmental sustainability, because in AI, bigger is always better. Have bigger models is always better, but from an environmental perspective, less is always better. So these two things fundamentally cannot combine. It's just impossible.
AI has been compared to the discovery of fire. That's big, if true. But if everyone will be using it for everything, we'll need to figure out how to stop it from burning down the house. This is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Back in the day, and I mean way back in the day, if you took down like a woolly mammoth, you could trade some mammoth meat for a better spear. It was the barter system. Then money came along. You didn't have to find that one spear maker who had a taste for mammoth and wanted to trade. You could take your cash from hunting and buy anything you wanted. Money made transactions more efficient. But as our producer Jenny DeRosio finds, more people these days are happily doing things the old-fashioned way.
When Samantha Fanning was pregnant with her second child, she faced a dilemma. The baby room needed sprucing up, but...
and I couldn't paint the room.
Samantha didn't have the time or the know-how to do it herself. And as a single mom, money was tight. Samantha's a professional photographer. So she went looking for someone to paint her nursery in exchange for something other than cash.
And so I traded photography for someone to come in and paint that bedroom.
After that, Samantha was hooked on bartering.
I did it with hair with a friend, and then I think one time I did eyelash extensions, where that's something I would never kind of have money to go and do, if not for trading. Massage therapy, when I didn't have benefits, that was really invaluable to me.
In Canada, bartering can happen between neighbors. Facebook groups are out there to help connect folks who want to get their trade on. There are apps to help small businesses trade goods and services, and community groups that host regular bartering get-togethers. One of them is Life School House.
So we bring things that we've made at home. It can be baked goods, it can be crafts, it can be art.
Christine Villeneuve lives in Antigonish, Nova Scotia.
And we put them all on a table, and everybody takes a turn introducing themselves, explaining what they've made. And then we all take turns going up and viewing the things on the table and selecting items that we would like to take home with us and trade for what we brought.
Life School House started in Halifax, but has now expanded and will launch nationally this summer. Christine says it's helped her connect with her community, make new friends, and stretch her dollars.
Feels like a really great bargain when you don't have to spend cash and you get exactly what you want.
It's hard to track how often Canadians swap yard work for sourdough bread, since it's typically an informal transaction. Robert Nason studies the informal economy. He's a professor at McGill University. He says bartering often falls under what's known as the underground economy.
If you go to, for instance, the Canadian Revenue Agency's site where they talk about the underground or informal economy, they're referring basically to any unregistered business activity. So something that's generating revenue but not paying taxes. So it's kind of undocumented economic transactions.
Exactly how much bartering is happening in Canada is hard to track. Even when the CRA puts a number to the underground economy, it includes a broad range of things: undeclared tips, hidden rent income, and the illegal drug trade. But informal or not, if you're trading your professional services, like dog walking, you should claim it as taxable income. Now, bartering isn't new. Think of Marco Polo and the Silk Road, and the Canadian fur trade.
These are some of the beginnings of economic transactions that we've seen in human history.
Even when humans started using modern currency, bartering never completely went away. It just became less popular. But Robert Nason says that's changing.
for good reason. I think in some ways, some parts of our economy have become overly financialized. They need to put a number on everything, right?
He says a lot of economic activity is just ones and zeros, moving money through cyberspace. Bartering is a movement against that. It's tangible.
It's a new trend in a way, but it's a new trend in a way that like vinyl is a new trend now. Like vinyl was the dominant way of doing things, and now it's growing again because people want the sense of materiality in a different way and moving away from pure digitalization, right? I would see this as a similar kind of thing, but a reaction against pure financialization.
Bartering is a way to leave the money out of it and make it about what else we can offer each other. So, anyone want to watch my dog this weekend? I make a mean batch of oatmeal chocolate chip. Eh? For the Cost of Living, I'm Jenny DeRosio.
On your radio and by podcast, this is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haberstrood. This is the sound of lower interest rates a-knockin'. People have been waiting for rates to go down and put some money back in their pocket. The Bank of Canada could deliver this week. If, and it's still an if, rates do go down, it will be the first cut in more than 2 years. What could this mean for the economy, housing, inflation? Jean-Francois Perrault is the chief economist at Scotiabank. Hello.
Hi there.
So, Jean-Francois, there's a lot of talk right now that the Bank of Canada is about to cut interest rates. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, it's pretty clear the Bank of Canada is going to be cutting interest rates at some point, and that is in the reasonably near future. There's very little debate about the fact that rates are going to be lower as we move through the summer and into the fall.
And when we do see that first quarter point cut, what does that say about the state of the economy right now?
Well, it speaks more about the state of inflation, which has been coming down, pretty, I won't say rapidly, but nicely over the last several months, to the point now where we are talking about, are they going to cut in June as opposed to July or some other point in time? Now, the flip side of that is that even though we've seen a lot of progress on the inflation side, growth has been hanging in there. It's been stronger than expected. And that, is a bit of a challenge for the Bank of Canada because, again, they've been raising interest rates to slow economic activity. If economic activity is a bit stronger than they thought, maybe that means that inflation pressures might be a little bit higher than they'd like, even though inflation has been going in the right direction.
Well, you're saying inflation is going in the right direction. I don't think we're out of the woods, but where are we in the woods, would you say?
I mean, I would think of it more in terms of, where are we in the tunnel? So the light at the end of the tunnel is getting pretty bright. So we're on our way out, certainly more than halfway through. Some measures of inflation are around 2%. Some are, a little bit more than 2. Some are slightly under 3. Some are still a little bit above 3. But there is, inflation is at a much, much better spot. Inflation was over 8% not too long ago. And now it's still too high, but I think at a point where certainly if we kind of rewind the clock and go back 6 or 7 months, where we are in inflation now would have been a nice surprise relative to what we would have thought, that many months ago.
And when you look at the numbers, are you feeling good? I mean, obviously they've come down, but everyone has their opinion. Some people just look at this or they look at that measure, and some people are more or less worried. Which camp do you fall into?
So we take a lot of comfort about what's happening on the inflation side. But when we look outside of current inflation numbers and you think about the risks to inflation, because that matters a lot too in terms of policy rates, there is still some concern out there, or certainly we have some concern that the risks remain tilted to the upside. So you look at stuff like, commodity prices have been going up again, oil and gas prices have been rising. I mean, it depends on the week, but generally rising since the beginning of the year. You're seeing wage growth, which is still very strong in Canada, and that's inflationary when productivity is as low as it is or as damaged as it is in Canada. We look down south to the U.S. economy, which is doing extremely well. And those things, when you put them all together, suggest that, the risks to inflation are still tilted to the upside, even though inflation has been behaving much better than we had anticipated. So, a lot of comfort, but still, I think, reason to be cautious about the future path of inflation. And one way to think about that is to go back and compare what's happened in the U.S. relative to what happened in Canada. So in the U.S., much of the last year, 2023, was characterized by U.S. inflation falling more rapidly than almost everybody had anticipated, to a point where towards the end of the year, people were saying U.S. inflation is dead. We don't have to worry about it anymore. The Fed's going to cut rates a lot in 2024. And basically, as soon as those bets started to be made, you had a reversal in U.S. inflation. There was kind of a potential lesson to be learned there is, you're better off having overwhelming evidence that inflation is going in the right direction, is going to stay in that direction, rather than, again, take a chance, maybe move a little bit too soon and have the U.S. experience happen to us, which is inflation starts to pick back up again, in which case there's a real problem for the Bank of Canada.
And then just kind of in a nutshell, it's interesting because so many people, I think, are looking forward to a rate cut, but really, as you're talking about it in sort of in a macroeconomic sense, the U.S. economy is rolling. That means they don't have to cut rates. Our economy, which is thinking about inflation, but on the growth side, we're not really rolling like they are, and so this rate cut, in a way, you could look at it as not a great sign.
Well, not necessarily. No, of course not. I mean, a bit of perspective, but the fundamental weakness we have in Canada is our productivity, and that imposes real limits on our ability to grow. So, and of course, the U.S. has not the opposite problem, but the opposite advantage, if you will. The reality is that in Canada that we have, markets have generally pushed back the date at which they think the Bank of Canada is going to be cutting interest rates because the economy has been stronger than expected. So, you could argue that the fact that rates haven't come down yet is actually a good thing because it means that the economy has been stronger than expected. So there's a balance between, what's actually the good thing here? Is it better to have lower interest rates and lower growth, or is it better to have, a little bit higher interest rates with higher growth? That's the world that we're in now in Canada. Now, it's not dramatically higher growth. It's 1.5. It's not strong, but it is stronger than what the Bank of Canada was hoping to achieve. So it's this kind of this wonky situation where, good news on the growth side is bad news on the interest rate side, and vice versa in some sense.
The one part of this we haven't talked about yet is the housing market. If rates do start going down, what do you think what's the likely reaction for the housing market?
Well, I mean, it's, last year, some you might recall, in January 2023, the Bank of Canada paused its tightening cycle, stopped raising the rate at 4.5%, its policy rate. And at that time, again, the housing imbalance was not quite as bad as it is now. It was still bad. One of the responses was, as people kind of started to think, okay, rates are going to come down now. I don't have to worry about mortgage rates going up anymore. You saw this very significant response in the housing market, almost instantaneous, where people rushed out to buy places, and you saw pretty significant price appreciation. There's a possibility that it happens again, because this fundamental challenge in the Canadian housing market, not enough homes for the amount of people that we have here, is that's basically guaranteeing a one-way street on house prices for a while. Now, not necessarily in every single market and every single point in time, but the law of supply and demand really do work in the housing market.
And then finally, if we think about what your outlook is for rates and how far they might come down or how many cuts we might be looking at here, if you were say talking to a homeowner who had a mortgage up for renewal in the next year or so, or someone on a variable rate mortgage who's kind of getting squeezed right now, what would you tell them about rates?
So listen, again, rates are coming down. There's a question of timing and magnitude, but we think in Canada, the Bank of Canada policy rate be in the 3.25%, 3.5% range by the end of next year. So, 100, 150 basis points lower than where they are now. So meaningfully lower. But that's about as far as we think they're going to go. And so that's one thing that's important for people to keep in mind. We are going to settle at interest rate levels that are higher than what we've experienced pre-pandemic. And that's not a bad thing. That's simply a reflection of the fact that, we anticipate the economy will be in kind of a normal setting in, say, late 2025, early 2026, relative to the period of low interest rates that, we saw basically from the time of the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, to the pandemic. So those rates were abnormally low by historical standards. The challenge over that time was to raise inflation, not lower it. It's important for people to kind of understand that if we end up at 3 or 3.5, that's not a bad thing. That's actually a pretty good thing, even though it's a lot higher than what folks were paying pre-pandemic.
Yeah, but I think that a lot of people, ears probably perked up right there when they heard 3.5, because that's feeling a lot better than 5.
Oh yeah, there's no question that rate relief is coming along, and again, it doesn't matter of how much. And that, you're right, that would be, dramatically different than where we are now.
Well, Jean-Francois Perrault, thank you so much for all that.
Well, thank you. You're very welcome. Thanks for your time.
Jean-Francois Perrault is the chief economist at Scotiabank. That's all for this week. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. And here's something. You can now listen to the show on YouTube. Just go to the CBC News page, scroll down a bit, look for The Cost of Living, and there we are. The show is produced by Daniel Nerman, Ellis Cho, Jenny DeRosio, and Jennifer Keene, with help from Caroline, the vengeful alligator, Ferris. Our executive producer, for the last time, is Tracy Johnson. I'm Paul Havertrud. Thanks for listening.